Thank you for joining me again on the Sutherland Report. And first of all, it's important that I wish you all a happy new year, as it's the 1st of January today, and wish you happy, prosperous 2024, no matter what we see out there and what we think is coming down the pipe. We carry on. So I'm privileged now to speak to a dear friend of mine, and we are now going to have a discussion with Tim Rivers, J6, and the new book that's coming out in the American Gulag series, as I'm going to call them right now. Tim, thank you very much for joining me today. Happy New Year to you and your family, and Happy New Year, we pray, to our J6 family. How are you, my friend?
Great, Mike. It's great to see you, partner. In a new year, we have 365 new chances to make a change in our countries, and I think it should be encouraging that we've made it this far, and that we have the path ahead of us to follow.
Tim, wise words. You very often come up with wise words, and I'm very, very grateful for that. I'm about to say words that in many ways I find appalling. I can't believe that we are coming up to a third anniversary of J6. The fact that we're even having to say third anniversary is, I personally find appalling. What are your thoughts as we are 5 days away from that?
I released a message that's going to be broadcast on the 6th to all of the people who've been in this fight. And I could just boil it down to two easy sentences that Kyle Fitzsimon sent to me in his recent letter. I'm in Arizona today, but Kyle is in my home state in Florida, incarcerated in the northern part of the state. You'll never meet a nicer, more talented, more dedicated family man, a loving person. He has his art is throughout both books. I urge you'll just be stunned at how talented this individual is and how poignant his messages are through his art. But he always says, Tim, don't give up the ship. It's a long swim to shore. And I think those are words of encouragement as well as words of warning and words of advice for us to persevere. That this is not a race we can afford to not cross the finish line in.
Tim, there's a new book coming out. Could you very kindly give me a brief history of the American Gulag Chronicles book, how that came about, and where we are now with that incredible product, and now book 2?
It's a chain of providence, that things happen the way they happen, that you meet the people you're supposed to meet, that you do the things that God and providence has put in front of you to do. And that's what this is. This is just a chain of events, an improbable chain of events. Started with me doing election integrity work, bumping into some people on Telegram who were trying to make sense of what was happening to J6 defendants and families that were being swept up in these horrific raids. And they encouraged me to write to some of these people. And at those days, it wasn't the large cadre of folks that we have arrested and in prisons now. It was less than a couple of hundred. And so I just picked out a letter and wrote to that individual for my wife and I, and gave him encouragement, told him how we supported what he did and how we'd love to help however we could. And I got this 4-page letter back. That pretty much just kicked the wind out of my sails. And at first I wanted to cry, and then I wanted to break things. And because this letter was from a 22-year retired Green Beret war veteran who'd been the last 10 years working as a protectorate contractor in some very scary places that you and I would never want to go to. Just an American hero, 3 times decorated. And his letter of what had happened to him and the losses that he was experienced because of this, it just broke my heart. And so I wrote more letters, and people that I wrote to started writing back, just like Jeff had done to me. And their stories were really important because they were telling things that nobody else was hearing anywhere else. The mainstream media was giving you a completely different story. The actual government itself was lying through its teeth about the problems that day and how it had happened. But these letters were basically trying to tell the truth. And of course, nobody was seeing them but the people who were writing to them. And so we thought it was necessary for other people to see those letters as we started publishing those things on Telegram. And it became a pretty engaging project. And along with Marie Goodwin, we created J6 Patriot News as a platform to do that on Telegram. And of course, you can find that on almost every social media platform. You'll find a presence for J6 Patriot News. I urge you to look for it and follow what's happening. And through that, we had such an enormous, people started reading the letters we were posting and started sending us their letters. And I mean, it's just a floodgate open up. For those of you who don't understand what's going on here, there's a program called the Patriot Mail Project. You can go to patriotmailproject.com. And they're there to provide a link with the political hostages and prisoners of America and Canada, by the way. The Canadian convoy folks are in there. And I believe there's even some folks in England who are vaccine deniers who have been jailed and are being persecuted. Just a way for patriots to stay in contact with them and to give them support and succor. And those letters, man, they just started pouring in. And Marie Goodwin, my partner at J6 News, says, this isn't enough. We're only getting to the people in Telegram and maybe a few other platforms. And, we're being shadow banned. Nobody's reading these letters, but the people who already know. We need people who don't know to read these letters. And that was the birth of the first book. American Gulag Chronicles, Letters from Prison, picks it up in September of 2021, when some of these men and women have already been in prison for well over 6 months under horrific and torturous conditions, well beyond Geneva Convention standards, well beyond ACLU standards of inhuman and inhumane treatment. And we tell their story through their letters for an entire year, from September 21 through basically October of 22. And there's 35 people represented in this book. You'll see their letters. You'll see their art. It's beautifully illustrated, not only by the prisoners with their own work, but by our talented editor and graphic layout artist, Marie Goodwin. She's just really did a fantastic job with book one. And it's been out for well over a year, and 10,000 copies and change in print. And we urge everybody, if you haven't seen it, this is a piece of history that you might want to have, because it will either be something people will be talking about for decades, or it will be a banned book across the world. And so I urge you to get your copy pretty quickly at lettersfromprison.us. And here we are, year three. And another year has passed by with these men in prison, and their lives have been destroyed. What's been happening in the courts, that those of us who are looking in from the outside, we just don't see the travesty of justice that's occurring in this country. But you hear it in their letters, and you hear it in their testimonies and their interviews on our website, j6patriotnews.com. And when enough of these, we've passed another full year in October of 2023 from the end of book one. And so it was necessary to keep telling. Remember, folks, a chronicle it's a testimony in time. It's an enactment, a reenactment in words, or sometimes even in pictures, of what has happened through chronology. And we're going to talk a little bit about how important timelines are in a few minutes. But this is a timeline in their own words and their own letters. You'll see their letters in their own handwriting. You'll hear their plea to America. You'll see their commitment, their faith, their perseverance, their incredible fealty to a country that is persecuting them. It's an amazing piece of work. And book two brings you right into October of 2023. The Art of Confinement is a testimony to strength and faith and patriotism that just has to be read to be realized. And again, you're going to need a handkerchief. And so that's where we stand here. I hope to God I do not see book three. I hope there is never a necessity. I hope 2024 brings us 364 days of opportunity to change this and restore our countries. I see tyranny in your country, Mark. I see it in mine. I just recently did an interview with Laura Lynn in Canada. It's happening in Canada. We are surrounded by a force of evil that can only be refuted by a force of good, and that is each and every one of us. So how many people that are listening to us are willing to be forces for good, like these men and women in prison right now?
I couldn't have said it better myself. And in one sense, shortly we can segue into a video, David Summerall, in regard to the whole thing of timeline. But here's a really important explanation that we need, because so many people are so bad with history. Yes. Tim, why did you name it? Where is the influence in regard to the word Gulag and Chronicles come from?
I think Gulag is an older word that's been bastardized, but it really gained a meme during the Stalin years in Russia, in the USSR. And there was a not even an activist, just a regular person in Russia who casually in a letter made a joke about Stalin's mustache and the way he looked and acted. And the Stasi came and got him and his family and sent him out into Siberia, into these work camps that were really designed to eliminate, if not reprogram and break you into the government's mode of behavior. And they called these gulags. And so his book that he wrote when he escaped that Russia and when he brought his family to safety in, I believe it was 1973 in Paris, he released a Russian language version of the Gulag Archipelago. There was a seminal 3-book work that detailed what happens in Russia and what happens to humans when freedom is taken away and when tyranny rules absolutely. And it was both the biography and a warning. And so it's fitting that as we see these things happening exactly as he had described them in the Gulag Archipelago, exactly as is happening in America and in some respects Britain and Canada today, these warning words have impact. And so American Gulag Chronicles is not only a nod to his warning, but it is an additional warning to Americans that what happened in Stalinist Russia is happening in your backyard.
Absolutely. And the key word that I've suddenly thought of, because it's very pertinent to our nation in the UK, is this whole thing of centralization. I've said this, unless people go to America, have dear American friends, get involved in the culture, get out of New York, LA and Washington, and I haven't been to Washington, DC, except via airports. But the fact, and I've been to the other places, but the fact is that you do not then get to grips with the culture of America, and then you begin to understand it. Then you begin to understand historically where it has come from. But there are words that I think Reagan said, which is, don't panic. We're from the government. Everything's going to be all right, so to speak. That's a paraphrase. But that is this whole thing of what is at the center of any true American patriot is small government. You do not want government to interfere with your lives. That's why, let's say it, when an organization like the FBI, which is very relevant to all of our discussions constantly, not because of us, but because of their behavior, how the FBI then comes about and is then created, eventually it became, known as the FBI in that sense. But when Teddy Roosevelt pushes this through and is then created as a federal body, that was a concern. It was a concern within Congress and the Senate, but it's an anathema to America for what it really stands for, which is to have federal interference. It then goes to state, and the fact that you are then taking personal responsibility for your actions and who you are, and then to be rewarded by that. Your hard work is rewarded, your individualism is rewarded, and this is what key thing that we're touching on that if we are all made in the image of God, we are all individuals, we all have a different role and a different calling within that. It's a long-winded way of trying to then explain more and more the American psyche. That's why this incident, what happened on Jan 6, 2021, the fact that people went and exercised their constitutional, God-given rights. You have alienable rights. They were there to make a noise, not to cause any trouble whatsoever. And then the rest is history in how that has then played out. Your comment, your thoughts on that, Tim?
I think that our leadership in America has gotten too comfortable with giving orders instead of taking them. Our government, you were right, Mark, our government is meant to be small. It was designed by the founders to serve, not to be served. And that is what we're seeing in America. We are one of the highest taxed citizens in the world. We tax everything we do. We tax our income. We tax our homes. We tax our property. We tax the money that's already been taxed when we buy groceries. We tax it again when we buy gasoline. We tax it when we buy a vehicle. We are ridiculously taxed. These are the shackles, the economic shackles that America feels now. And I think that the largesse that you see so much protesting about from the citizenry of America to the incredible unlimited spending of our legislature for things that we do not feel benefit our country, this is where I think we're beginning to get the disconnect. And I think our legislator has forgotten who the American people are. And I'm, you mentioned that, Mark, New York, Washington, D.C. We have a very famous artist, kind of a country rock band here called the Charlie Daniels Band. And Charlie Daniels is this very country looking guy with a cowboy hat and a great big fluffy beard and a country accent that goes a mile. And he recently did an ad that I think was directed at the outside world, outside America, but it was so poignant because to me, it demonstrated the disconnect between our government and our people. Charlie Daniels was talking to the terrorists and Hamas and folks who might threaten this country. And he said, you might think you know America because you've met our politicians. You've met our bankers. You've met our lawyers. You've met the soft underbelly of our country. But you haven't met our construction workers. You haven't met our rodeo heroes. You haven't met our cowboys. You haven't met our steel workers. You haven't met our patriots. And you better hope you never do. And that was a great warning, but it so poignantly pointed out that I think our government has forgotten who we Americans are, our determination to be free, our willingness to sacrifice everything to make sure that if we can't be free, our children will be. There is no end to what a patriot will do in this country. And I think that scares the government because they don't understand that that is our role, that they have lost their way. We are still in the role of drivers of this country's direction, of this country's politics, of this country's culture. And just because we gave you authority to act on our behalf doesn't mean that you can act as you wish instead of as we wish. And that's my message to legislators and senators in my country, in your country, in Canada. You better remember who the people are, my friends, because we'll only tolerate this so long.
Well, I think it's fantastic the way that Charlie then described that. I mean, the Charlie Daniels Band, Devil Went Down to Georgia, etc. Something that I very much appreciate the music, but also appreciating the culture. That's what I'm saying about where people come from, why they say what they do, because it is culturally and it's where it is rooted. On this side of the pond, for me, I grew up with John Wayne films. Yes. Love them. Directed by Ford. I love all that. We see the geography. We see where they are made. Clint Eastwood's The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. The Americana. Yes, we grew up with all that. And we've seen the memes, of Clint Eastwood's face sort of looking at youngsters going, really? Really? I mean, this is the disconnect. But the fact that we should be able to celebrate this culture because it is important. Because when I mentioned people like John Wayne, you know, it's men being men, and also someone that was not afraid to say grace at a table wherever he was before he ate. We got to remember these things. The problem is over here, we have so been embedded with socialism since the Second World War, since Attlee won at that point after the Second World War. Churchill lost the election. We have forgotten. We have had this huge fight that has been going on, and then as we've realized that our institutions, Marxism, has marched right through them on this side of the pond, and is certainly having a good go, as we see on your side of the pond. Tim, I just want to slightly segue, because I want to put up stophate.com. Want to put it just quickly between us, put this up and draw attention to our dear friend David Summerall of stophate.com, and also to Daniel Goodwin of stophate.com as well. And last night, and I am dating this because it's the 1st of January, but last night the documentary 1,000 Days of Terror trailer, and then the latest documentary in regard to the timeline of events that that David and Daniel have very much contributed to that, because of the amount of hours and investigation that David has done, and giving that information to lawyers, etc., for the prisoners that have been put in the Gulag. I think it's really important to say. I want to say this from my heart, looking in, is the sacrifice of people, is your personal sacrifice, is Marie's sacrifice in that, Daniel's sacrifice, and David's sacrifice, and others in regard, and of course, everyone with on the board, particularly, that there's certain things that people are doing, but many other people around America, the sacrifice they've made to raise the alarm. This is David's 3rd documentary. I recommend everyone look that up. Go to stophate.com and you can find the documentary, the one before that, right, you know, Bloody Hill, and then Writing History. And these are important. These are really important documentaries, but also all the other info. Tim, what does it feel like to have been banging on about the injustice of this from Jan 6, 2021, to know that footage is being held back, that lies are being said in the public space, and we are just not able to get to grips with, well, basically we've just got a media that is just totally against us at that point. What are your thoughts on that? How does that make you feel?
Well, it obviously makes me feel more determined to get it. I mean, you know, what's the important thing? Everybody in your country and in Scotland, Sherlock Holmes is a seminal guy, right? And everybody remembers the story of the dog that did not bark. Well, these are the videos that won't be shown. And they have the same import in our little conspiracy here as they did in Sherlock Holmes mystery, because it's the missing bits that are most perplexing. Why are they missing? What is there? You just piqued my curiosity by telling me I can't see them.
Yes.
And I think that's where we stand. But I also go harken back to George Washington in a letter that he wrote to one of his supporters who was concerned that the truth of the state of the army and everything was going to, you know, be hidden by these people who wanted to get out of the war and wanted to abandon the revolution. And he wrote, and he says, my friend, truth will always prevail when good men take pains to reveal it. And there are good men taking pains to reveal this. And I assure you that you cannot hide truth forever. We've already kicked the door in. Maybe you want to put it in the closet, we'll open that door. Maybe you want to hide it under the bed, we'll use a flashlight. You won't hide these things from the public forever, because the wall of this narrative is crumbling so fast. The bricks are falling out like crazy. The mortar is crumbling. The people who are hiding behind it are scurrying for the darkness. Have 50 senators and legislatures decided, this is a great year to retire from Congress and the
Yes.
Senate.
Yes.
When the mind comes to rats from a sinking ship. And at the same time, I believe that there is an arc of justice to the universe. It always bends to justice. It may not bend quickly. It may be a very poor arc, but it always arrives at justice if good men take pains to ensure it. And folks like you and David and Daniel and all the people who are sacrificed, I'm reminded of another quote that says, sacrifice sometimes is unavoidable, but necessary. And this is necessary sacrifice. As important as it was at the beginning of our country, as important as it was to Canada and Britain and their own sovereignty, this is worth sacrifice in America. And I think good people are finally waking up to that. I hope it's not too late. I do believe in 2024, we have many opportunities to right the ship of state, to not abandon the ship and give it up and not have to swim the long way to shore, but to bring us safely into port. And in that manner, if you buy these books and you learn truth from them at the same time, you'll be fighting. As you read these words and you save these books for the posterity of history, you will also be fighting actively because your money will be protecting and helping these men and women in prison and keeping their families alive and sustained. And that is more important than anything. So again, I urge you to remember Matthew 25:35 through 40, as you have done for the least of these, my brothers and sisters, you have done for me. And so let's take that as admonition going into 2024. Let us do for others as we would wish them to do for us. Let us succor the weak. Let us heal the injured. Let us bind up the wounds of our countries and return to a normality and a humanity that is so important. Again, Mark, I really thank you for everything that you do, certainly for serving on the board of American Gulag Chronicles. It's a very important position. And without the volunteers in this board, the books and everything that we do would not be possible. So thank you so much for that and for what you've done in the past and what I know you're going to do in the future. And everybody who's listening, remember, don't do nothing.
Tim, thank you for your kind words. In many ways, I find them embarrassing because I'm thousands of miles away, and there are times when I'm going, what can I do? I know I've been able to make certain connections, and that's in, e.g., to get the voice out there, and that's important. And I'm very grateful for that. All I did a few years ago was get on a plane. I met David Summerall, and the rest is history. Yeah. And that by divine and what happens. And what we need, people, and it's a constant thing of working out to get the books sold in Europe and around and in Canada. And that's what needs to happen. Tim, I don't want to take up too much of your time, but one question again is just coming back to this. And I know you have already touched on it, but I think it's a really important thing to reaffirm, because we do need positivity and we do need encouragement, not that's built on sand, but it's built on solid ground. Tim, what keeps you going?
I really don't know. That's a very strange question, because I really don't know how I got going. You're like asking somebody who's in a plane, how'd you take off? I'm not sure. I might have been asleep at takeoff. The reality is, I just feel that this is something that is important in my life, even though I kind of had accepted that my active life was, in the past, and that I was looking at, okay, this is what you're supposed to do your last years of your life, enjoy family, enjoy life. But I think back now in retrospect to the men and women of the revolution. They weren't young people. They were statesmen and property owners. They were in their 60s and their 50s, and some were even in their 70s. George Washington crosses Delaware, and he'd have been able to pick up Social Security when he did it.
Wow.
And so I think that age really doesn't have anything to do with it, but I think a calling of the heart, maybe an activation of something all of us have, what I've been calling the patriot gene, that something inside of you will look at your children, will look at your grandchildren, will look at the future that is ahead of them, and then you'll act. because you cannot let them fall like this. And so then maybe that's what drives me. I have children and I have grandchildren, and I see a future ahead of them that looks bleak, and I will not fit them for shackles while I breathe, and neither should anybody else.
I don't think anyone could have said it better than you, and also drawing that link to Washington crossing the Delaware, which I think was on a Christmas Day, which I always thought was a very, very clever tactic, as we were most probably sleeping, thinking, well, they're not going to do anything now, where we are wearing our red jackets, looking like a very Belisha beacon target. But I think that was a very, very clever move, and I take my hat off to him for doing that. Tim, where can people find the books? Where can people find everything that we're trying to promote?
Well, our website is at j6patriotnews.com. But you mentioned the timeline. This J6 timeline documentary, folks, it is the culmination, the gestalt of 3 years of investigative work of gathering this data and information. You must see this video. Go to stophate.com/J6. Follow the link for J6, the real timeline. Get educated on truth. And let's break down the wall of lies. This 3 years of history of lies must be undone for us and for the world. And so that's a good way to do it. And the other way is, of course, if you're in America, you can order the book at lettersfromprison.us. And we urge you to kind of get copies of this, distribute them. We give a copy to every member of Congress. Give one to your sheriff, give one to your own legislature, send one to your state governor, send one to your library. It is entered into the Library of Congress. It will be a historical document, as book 2 will be. And it is available for pre-order, and we'll start shipping in the next couple of weeks. So I think that's what everybody can do. Everybody can do something. Go to patriotmailproject.com, write a prisoner. Maybe it'll set off that patriot gene in you like it did in me. But everybody can do something. And as Jeremy Brown, another famous Green Beret, January 6th prisoner, also incarcerated in my state, he always ends his statements with, America, don't do nothing.
And I'm just going to stophate.com, a reminder at that point. Please go on there and you will find all the documentaries and everything there. And it's just really, really important. Absolutely. America, don't do nothing. We are joined in this fight across the world. And as Ephesians 6 says, very clearly, we're not fighting flesh and blood, but principalities and powers. This is a huge spiritual battle. And the important thing of illustrating that to me, and I want to know what you think of this, Tim, in the latest documentary, the real timeline, the fact that we've seen all this, footage put out when they're accusing patriots of attacking and doing this, and then suddenly there's a timeline. And I could be wrong, David, so please don't shoot me. But 105, 106, there seems a link between, and then suddenly the police are then throwing, smoke, law enforcement smoke bombs, and someone gets a pellet through their mouth. And then it's as though all the patriots started this. No, they didn't. And this is the issue, that suddenly the evidence is out there, and that they did not want people exercising their democratic rights. The fact that they'd lost count of how many feds were in the crowd and on the ground a few weeks ago, that coming out is a joke. It's not a joke. It's not funny at all. But the fact that how this then has unfolded. And I think the other thing that I'll just stop and say, I've found very hurtful with certain people that are not which will be nameless, when people have gone, well, we knew it was a setup. We could see this, see that. Really? Okay, well, good for you. Good for you. But people went who may not have had the privilege to see what you did, but they went to exercise their constitutional rights on your behalf.
Yes.
Please help them. You may call that naive or whatever. I call that the Constitution of the United States, that sadly civics has not been taught properly for, you could say, 35 to 40 years at times in your education system. That is a huge issue. But please support these people. Please don't come out with very clever comments that are unhelpful. Tim, I just want to thank you for your time. Is there anything else that you want to say and end our time together?
Well, we see this in America. We see this as an American government problem, but the reality is it's the world government problem, and that has to be fought at every country level. There has to be an independence to nation states, or we will end up being slaves on the world level. And I think it's as important in Scotland, as important in the UK, as important in Canada as it is in America. And so focus on that. Do your duty as a patriot, whatever country you're a patriot of. It needs those people. That's the lifeblood of your country, and your actions alone will govern what happens in your future. So thank you again, Mark. Again, 364 days, folks, many opportunities to do good, to right the ships of state. And I urge you, don't do nothing. Thank you again, Mark.
Amen, my brother. I'm going to play us out. Tim Rivers, thank you so much for honoring me with our discussion today. And I wish you a happy new year, and a happy new year to everyone that's watching. Thank you very much indeed. Please go up, look up the book, buy it. Tim, thank you very much. I'm going to play us out. God bless. Talk to you soon. Bless.